Tonight on Reporting Scotland, 5 years after the first day of COVID lockdown.
We have an hour-long special looking at how the pandemic has changed Scotland.
We've returned to University Hospital Monklands, where we filmed at the height of the pandemic to see how things are now.
I think the staff are still trying to go over what happened. I think it was quite a traumatic experience for the staff.
I asked the current Health Secretary if we're prepared for a future pandemic.
We'll also look at the impact on businesses and on young people. And I've been talking to someone who helped to keep us cheerful during lockdown.
Into the final minute and Olive in possession, but this is where Mabel is strong.
Do you think they helped you then?
If the Olive and Mabel thing hadn't happened, they would still have helped me each and every day just by them being dogs.
The commentator Andrew Cotter told me how Olive and Mabel saved his sanity.
And in other news, the Police Federation hits out at a cash settlement for the family of a man who died in police custody. The Union for Rank and File Officers says it's surprised the Chief Constable settled the claim.
Coming up in the sport, Scotland are relegated to League B of the Nations League, but Steve Clarke and his players discover who they'll face.
Hello, I'm Laura Miller.
And I'm Laura McKeever. Welcome to Monday's programme.
Five years ago tonight, Scotland was ending its first full day under lockdown. Just take a minute, think back to where you were and how you felt. COVID had arrived, but we were yet to find out just how devastating it would be, how very many lives it would take, and just how long its legacy would last.
Tonight, in this special edition of Reporting Scotland, we're going to look back at what the country went through during the pandemic, a moment in history, unique and surreal, which upturned our everyday lives. Should things have been done differently? Would a future lockdown ever work? And what have we learned from that time?
We'll look at all of that tonight, and we'll also remember some of the lighter moments and communities who came together. But we start tonight with the NHS. The service and its workers were expected to step up like never before, and the impact of COVID and the decisions taken have been long-lasting. We went back to University Hospital Monklands, where we filmed at the height of the pandemic to see how things are now. Our health correspondent Lisa Summers reports.
I've never been so scared in my whole life.
You keep me alive no matter what.
You just do everything for us.
There's no feeling in the world like holding somebody's hand when their family can't be with them and their heart beats its last beat. That's just one of the hardest things in this world.
OK, we're going to have a safety brief now, 3 o'clock.
5 years on, and critical care is a very different place. But staff say the legacy of COVID remains.
It was so scary, you didn't know what was coming through the door in every shift. I think the staff are still trying to go over what happened. From COVID, we've lost a lot of experience.
Post-COVID, many experienced staff left, feeling burnt out and exhausted. The whole health service is struggling to recover.
During COVID, the NHS was placed on an emergency footing, but by May 2020, the Health Secretary had set out a recovery plan. But 5 years down the line, and waiting lists are at record highs, we're carrying out fewer operations than we were pre-pandemic, and 14% of hospital beds are occupied by patients who can't get out because of pressures in social care.
We come in every day and the hospital is full, there's no beds.
Dr Sanjeev Chauhan is the Clinical Director for Surgery and Intensive Care. He says it will take years to clear the backlog.
The numbers to clear those waiting lists will potentially take years. We're making real inroads into those waiting lists, but that's the pressures. To have people waiting a year, 2 years, 3 years for treatment is appalling.
Downstairs in A&E, there is no room to bring patients in, and staff are honest about the challenges they face every single day.
We've got spaces in the corridor, so if we start to get a longer wait, then we can start to move patients out of cubicles and into the corridor as they're waiting to come in.
We don't have enough cubicles to accommodate the patients, so we've had to create trolley escalation space areas to accommodate trolleys to allow patients to be offloaded from ambulances and allow them to get back on the road. It is just a corridor and it's in between toilets and doesn't provide dignified care. The numbers of patients that have to stay in the emergency department beyond 4 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours are the highest that we've ever seen. And we know that those patients don't do well, so there's associated harm with patients staying in our department for that long.
You're getting a lot of anxieties and fears from the patients and their relatives, but that's then impacting on our staff and our staff's morale, their well-being, because they are, a lot of the days, going home, they feel that they've not done a good job.
Half a decade on from the pandemic, and these images are a reminder of the toll that COVID took. But staff say the consequences continue to be felt. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland Monklands.
Now, 2 metres. That's what life for much of 2020 was measured in, keeping 2 metres distance from each other at all times, what experts came to call social distancing. When's the last time you heard that?
Some other things you might not have thought about for a while. The R number, the reproductive rate of the virus, herd immunity and lockdown, where everyday life was altered beyond all recognition. All of these were very much at the forefront of our minds as the COVID pandemic unfolded. 5 years ago, here's what the First Minister at the time outlined.
But the overall message is very clear. People must stay at home. I know how hard this is for everybody, but people should not be meeting friends. They should not be meeting family members who live outside of their home. And as I have said previously, for all of us right now, life should not be feeling normal. If it is, then you're almost certainly not sticking to the rules that we are asking people to abide by.
Stay at home, protect the NHS, save lives soon became the official UK government message on this, with the lecterns where these updates were delivered emblazoned in these slogans. Here in Scotland, we eventually had facts, which might not be immediately as easy to recall, but does sum up the situation.
As restrictions change, remember facts to protect yourself and others. Face coverings must be worn on public transport, in shops, in certain indoor public places, and should be worn where distancing is difficult. Avoid crowded places. Clean your hands and surfaces regularly. Keep a 2-metre distance from others, and self-isolate and book a test if you have symptoms. Remember facts for a safer Scotland.
The weeks, months and years following the end of March 2020 were filled with images the likes of which many had never seen. Empty supermarket shelves amid panic buying, completely deserted towns and cities with people heeding stay-at-home warnings. More and more of our lives moving online. Schools shut, replaced by remote learning, with everything from Zoom classes to Zoom quizzes, and working from home the norm for many. The huge health service response, including pop-up hospitals like the Louisa Jordan in Glasgow and drive-through testing centres. And what, for a while anyway, became a weekly tradition of clapping for carers every Thursday night.
And almost every day, politicians and scientists brought home the cold, hard reality, the number of people who lost their lives to COVID-19. In total, more than 16,000 of them. But over the course of the next 2 years, with waves, variants and lockdowns coming and going, the focus on that death toll shifted, eventually looking at the number of people who had received the vaccine.
Our political editor, Glenn Campbell, has been looking back at some of the key decisions that were made that affected every one of us.
Every community in Scotland suffered losses in the pandemic.
In the first 3 years after COVID-19 first arrived in the UK, approximately 16,500 people with the virus died here in Scotland. That's the equivalent of losing the population of an entire town the size of Cowdenbeath.
Stay at home. That is the clear message I gave.
Unprecedented decisions kept us apart to slow down the spread of the virus, and the Health Secretary at the time felt the gravity of locking us down.
The single moment for me, if you like, was the day after we announced the lockdown, and I drove into Edinburgh. There were no cars, there were no people, and I looked back down Princes Street and it was empty. And I remember thinking, my God, I hope we've got this right.
Did you do the right thing?
I believe we did. I believe we did. I don't believe in the circumstances that we're in at that point that there was an alternative, reasonable and safe choice.
There were daily briefings from ministers and high levels of public compliance with COVID restrictions. This former Scottish Conservative leader, who was a UK minister when COVID began, became more critical of limiting public freedoms as the pandemic wore on.
Some of the restrictions from both governments here in Scotland and at a UK level were wrong, and I think the governments would accept that as well.
So would people comply with another lockdown if there was a new emergency?
I think there would be more pushback. I think people would be questioning. So I think the circumstances may be similar, but if the detail was very different in terms of this is a virus that could kill people, I think they would listen to the government to an extent. Whether we could have a full-scale lockdown again, I think that is very much up for question.
So it depends on the nature of the virus, but I think there would be more questions. Show us the evidence. Actually show us the evidence. Because you really are asking people to do something quite extraordinary.
There are now 2 public inquiries scrutinising the decisions that were taken by ministers in Edinburgh and London. This expert advised both governments throughout the pandemic.
Do you think we are better prepared should this happen again?
No, I don't think we have, because we've forgotten. Yes, we didn't respond perfectly. Yes, we can learn from that. Yes, we can do it better. But the notion that, oh well, actually the response is worth anything, so you just ride it out and let everybody get infected, that would be a catastrophe if that narrative was allowed to run.
Back in Cowdenbeath, locals hope there will never be a need to return to lockdown and its heartaches.
I think there would be big issues with that if we were to go into lockdown again, just because all the people that lost work and everything, and there's all their social life in that too. I just think it would be very fair, to be honest.
The way that it was done, everything was just, you can't move anywhere, you can only go out once, you can't go and sit in a park. To me that was silly.
I wouldn't be very happy about another lockdown, but if it was needed, we wouldn't really have a choice, because our families are just going to keep on dying because if we didn't listen. So.
Over the last few years, life has returned to normal and COVID consigned to memory, a shared experience of the most extraordinary kind.
Well, Glenn is with us now. And Glenn, Jean Freeman, who we saw in your piece there, was giving evidence to the COVID inquiry today, talking about PPE supply in Scotland. And that is a demonstration, perhaps, that those decisions taken 5 years ago continue to be scrutinised.
Absolutely. The judges have yet to offer their adjudications on how this pandemic was handled, not just by the UK government, by the devolved administrations in Cardiff Bay, in Stormont and here at Holyrood as well. It was during the pandemic that the phrase "four nations" approach to government was to the fore, because the governments were in many cases trying to coordinate their responses, but sometimes they took different views. I think the pandemic demonstrated just how powerful devolved government could be, but it also demonstrated its limitations, because there were times where, let's say, ministers here at Holyrood might have liked to put in place stronger restrictions, but they knew they could only really do that with the UK government's support, because it would need the Treasury to come up with more cash to offer compensation and assistance to those who might need it in those circumstances. I remember very clearly sitting at the UK COVID inquiry when the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson gave evidence. He said that in future these emergencies should be handled more on a UK-wide basis. Obviously, ministers here at Holyrood, I think, would be keen to retain a degree of independent decision-making according to the specific circumstances here. So that is a debate that has yet to be fully resolved. But of course, the COVID inquiries in Scotland and the UK are still taking evidence, never mind reaching their final conclusions.
OK, Glenn Campbell at Holyrood, thank you.
Well, we've heard from some of the people responsible for making decisions at the time, but what about people making decisions now? Well, Neil Gray is the current Health Secretary. I spoke to him earlier and I asked him whether he thought we had locked down for too long, especially in relation to how much school children missed.
I certainly reflect on that. You know, I've got young children that were going through school at the time, and you can see the impact that the pandemic has had on various generations, but particularly our young people, and we're seeing some of the effects of that both within education and within the health service at the moment. Again, I think government took decisions that were in the best interests of saving lives, of protecting lives, and making sure that we were able to get through which was a global pandemic, the scale of which we haven't seen before.
What is the plan then? I'm sure people watching will want to know, is there a plan, and what is the plan? Is there a blueprint plan ready to go if you need to use it next month?
Obviously, we don't know the circumstances of what the next pandemic will throw up at us.
But for a flu-type similar pandemic?
So for that, I think, again, I go back to what Jean Freeman said yesterday, making sure that we are resilient in the testing environment that we have available and the capacity that we want to have available to us. I'm currently co-chairing in government a ministerial oversight board looking at pandemic preparedness, making sure that our schools, our universities, our health service, the entirety of the public sector and the economy is ready should there be another pandemic in the coming period.
So you can confidently say there is a plan?
Well, I think it's important that we reflect on the fact that we don't know what the next pandemic is going to arrive with. We don't know how it's going to transmit. We don't know the impact on individuals. We don't know what the potential impact is going to be upon the health service. What we need to prepare for is the resilience of the system to respond. And that is certainly something that, off the back of the Standing Committee on the Pandemic Preparedness report, as well as the work that's going on with the COVID inquiries and the work in government, across governments across the UK, we are looking to work together to coordinate just that, to make sure that we can respond as effectively as possible.
Given, though, the impact we know that the pandemic had on the health service and the situation the health service is now in, with A&E waiting times, with cancer treatment waits longer than a 62-day target not being met, almost 3 in 10 patients referred for urgent suspicion of cancer waiting longer than that 62-day target for their first treatment. Given the pressures we know the NHS is under, and we've heard it today from Monklands Hospital, our health correspondent Lisa Summers, hearing from them, are we ready to deal with this again?
First of all, in terms of the position of our health system, the number one priority of myself, working with the First Minister, is to see that continued recovery from COVID. We are still dealing with COVID-related backlogs in elective care.
Indeed, so are we ready then to deal with this again if it happens?
And I think making sure that we do deliver against improved waiting times, that is a number one priority for me over this year. Working with staff, working with people across the health and social care system to improve upon our waiting times so that we have a more resilient health service. That is, and also a health service that delivers for our people.
So you think it could cope?
I think that we would, the health service responded in an incredible way to COVID.
But it's now under all these new pressures, so could it cope now in the state it's in 5 years later?
I'm confident that the resilience of our health service would continue to be one that would respond to whatever was thrown at it. Okay. But I want to make sure that I put even greater resilience into the system so that we can respond to the needs of the people of Scotland. On waiting times, you mentioned the cancer waiting times there. We're treating more people in time against both the 31-day and the 62-day waiting times than we were pre-COVID. That's because of the increased demand that there is there.
What have you learned, would you say, from the losses in care homes? And are those vulnerable care home residents safer now than they were in 2020 in event of another pandemic?
I think obviously it was devastating to see that position, and I know that is something, again, that Health Secretary at the time, Jean Freeman, reflects on as being of great trouble to everybody involved, and it is a consideration of the COVID inquiries as to the situation with regards putting people that were COVID positive into care homes. It's something that we need to reflect on, and we need to make sure that for future pandemics we are in a position to be able to have a greater testing capacity available much earlier, and that we're able to ensure we're able to respond in a way that protects lives. That is definitely what was foremost in the consideration of ministers in the pandemic past, and it's certainly going to be the consideration on pandemic's future.
Okay, Neil Gray, thank you very much for coming in and joining us.
Well, for those who lost loved ones during the pandemic, there was, of course, the pain of that loss, but that was magnified by an inability to say goodbye or to be there at the end. Attendance at funerals was strictly limited. Friends and families were unable to hug or comfort each other. Back in 2020, we spoke to Sandra Wilson from Coatbridge. Her husband Ian had just died with COVID. 5 years on, I caught up with her again to see how she's doing. Sandra, it's nice to see you.
Thank you.
It's almost exactly 5 years since we last met. How have you been?
I've been good, getting there. It was hard at first, obviously, but life moves on, it doesn't stop, and I've managed to build a new life for myself. Still miss him. Every minute of every day, I miss him.
I was looking back at the piece that we did, and I'd forgotten myself how far or how early that was in the lockdown. It was, when we spoke, it was April 2020, and I think Ian had died just the previous month.
Yeah.
So we were still at a really early stage of COVID and of lockdown.
Yeah.
How do you sort of reflect on that, given there was so much still to run of that time?
When Ian took ill, it was before lockdown. So I went into isolation with him when the world was normal. My world was normal. And when I came out of isolation after he had died, we were in lockdown.
Your daughters weren't able to really be with you to comfort you in the aftermath. And you weren't really able to say goodbye to Ian in the way that you would in, normal times. Do you feel cheated at all by that?
Not really. I knew that Ian had been ill a year before, and I knew that time was short, that any kind of simple chest infection could have done the damage for him. I was very lucky that probably because it was right at the start, I believe there were only 3 patients in the COVID ward, so they were allowing probably only 1 person in to each person. So I got in for a couple of hours every day, and just very lucky that I was there at the end.
You were looking forward to, when restrictions lifted, to going and enjoying the great outdoors like you and Ian did, and also to go and scatter his ashes somewhere special. Did you end up doing that?
I did. I took the tent and I went up to Dornoch. We had camped there many, many times. Managed to pitch it myself and scattered his ashes on the beach at dawn one morning. And I go up there every year now during that, at the end of this month when he would have the anniversary of his death, and spend a few days there.
What do you think Ian would say if he could see you now? And, do you think he would be proud of how you've managed to cope?
He had told me sometime before, long before he died, not to, if I found myself in this situation, not to be staying at home, not to be crying over him, to get out there. I was still here, I had a life to lead, and I better get on and lead that life and enjoy myself. So I'm doing my best.
It certainly sounds that way. And listen, you're looking well. Thank you very much for coming in and speaking to us again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for many, lockdown felt like life was grinding to a halt. But in the midst of that, some lives were just getting started. Babies born during that time are now due to start school this August. So how has being born in a pandemic affected their first 5 years? And how will it affect their future? Well, Rachel Bell has more.
Meet Ivy, Liam and Hunter. Born under lockdown and now preparing for Primary 1 after starting life just as the pandemic hit. Ivy was born in May 2020. Her mum Stacey recovered in hospital alone without her partner. She says it contributed to her postnatal depression.
I can't say for definite, but I do think it had a lasting impact on me emotionally, even when it led to having my second boy. It came flooding back. She's a very outgoing but shy girl. She's very bright.
Mummy, look what I found.
I don't know what a non-lockdown Ivy would be like. I think she is who she is. You know, her experiences shaped her to be this person that she is today. I don't know any different.
Happy birthday to me. Hip hip. Way.
Liam has just turned 5. He was born on the first day of lockdown. As he grew, his mum noticed his speech wasn't developing as expected.
Everyone just kept saying he had a speech delay because of lockdown, but then I was also like, but is it because of lockdown? What if he does have a speech delay and because of the pandemic, people are just automatically presuming that he's not been able to talk because he's not had a lot of interactions with people. Speech and language assessed him, and they did say that he wasn't really having a language delay, he had more of a language processing disorder, which kind of comes in line with children with ASD. He's just Liam. I wouldn't have him any other way. I'll always be there for him, regardless if it's caused by lockdown or it's just himself and his own development.
Nurseries and playgroups closed for big chunks of 2020 and 2021. But even when they opened, restrictions meant children and teachers couldn't interact and play as freely as normal.
Certainly for babies, I remember just being really sort of worried around sort of the wearing of the face coverings, being able to sort of read those kind of facial gestures. I think there probably has been some kind of impact around that in terms of sort of the children's kind of social communication skills.
6, 7, 8, 9.
This is Hunter. He spent his earliest months in lockdown. He's now preparing for school and he's raring to go.
Hunter is amazing. Hunter just brings so much joy. At nursery, you've got lots of friends. I feel our children are ready, you know, they are ready to go. And they love learning and are absolutely ready for their next steps.
More outdoor play and time with families were positive impacts for some. But experts say the effects of the pandemic on early childhood are still to be borne out.
I think what we can say with certainty from the research that we do have, including in Scotland, is that the pandemic has widened existing social inequalities for young children. So especially young children who were already at risk of poorer learning outcomes before the pandemic have been negatively impacted by the pandemic.
The children of lockdown had an unusual start to life, but now they'll experience their school journey at its fullest. Rachel Bell, reporting Scotland.
Well, we're going to have lots more on the impact of the pandemic in this special extended edition of Reporting Scotland, including looking at working from home, hearing from young people on their experiences and catching up with a man and his 2 dogs who went global thanks to the power of social media during lockdown. First, though, let's take a look at some of the day's other news and sport. And the Scottish Police Federation has criticised a decision by Police Scotland's Chief Constable to reach an out-of-court settlement with the family of Sheku Bayo. A joint statement issued between the family and Joe Farrell said the case had been resolved without the force admitting liability. Well, our Home Affairs correspondent David Cowan can tell us more. Dave, what more then do we know about the settlement?
Well, this May it will be 10 years since Sheku Bayo died in Kirkcaldy. He was 31 years old, a father of 2. He'd become involved in a violent confrontation with the police. He was restrained on the ground, lost consciousness and died in hospital. And none of the officers involved in the incident have faced charges over it. In 2018, Mr Bayo's family launched a damages claim against Police Scotland, seeking £1.85 million over what they alleged was his unlawful killing, and today we've received a joint statement from the family and the Chief Constable of Police Scotland, Joe Farrell, saying that a settlement had been reached without any admission of liability on the behalf of the police. In other words, they're not accepting that they did anything wrong. The statement said the Chief Constable had met the family at the end of last month and had offered her apology for their ordeal. So the action has been settled out of court, but we don't know the financial sum that was involved.
And Dave, what's the reaction been to this then?
Well, the family's lawyer, Amar Anwar, issued a statement to the media. He said the struggle for the truth continues as we reach the final stages of the public inquiry. Those who broke the law should remember there is no limit on justice. The Police Federation said it was surprised by the Chief Constable's decision to settle. And it said the only person who had, quote, indisputably broken the law that day was Sheku Bayu because, in their words, he had taken illegal drugs, armed himself with a knife, terrified members of the public and assaulted a female police officer. The Federation said the officers involved in the incident had believed they had acted responsibly given the danger that he presented. The public inquiry into what's happened that day back in May 2015 is now considering its findings.
OK, Dave in Edinburgh, thank you.
Now, a second teenager has appeared in court charged with murdering a 15-year-old boy in Glasgow. Amen Teckley died after being found injured in the St George's Cross area of the city earlier this month. Our reporter Hope Webb is here with us now. Hope, how much more do we know?
Yeah, so like you say, we have more details now about the court appearance of that 16-year-old accused of murdering Amen Teckley. We only got them in the last hour or so I'm going to read from them here. They're quite lengthy. Court papers state the 16-year-old acted with another during the attack on Clarendon Street in the city's St George's Cross area, like you mentioned there, on the 5th of March. Now, it's claimed the boy, while in possession of a frying pan, allegedly punched or otherwise struck Amen Teckley on the body. The charge further says that the boy allegedly struck Amen with a knife also. The 16-year-old made no plea when he appeared in private today at Glasgow Sheriff Court earlier today. A 14-year-old boy previously appeared at the same court 2 weeks ago, also charged with Amen's murder, as well as a separate assault charge as well. A 15-year-old boy also faces a charge of assault. Court papers state the 14 and 15-year-old boys, while acting with another unknown to the prosecutor, allegedly punched and kicked Amen on the head and also the body. An additional charge claims the 14-year-old was in possession of a knife in the city's Dumbarton Road area 3 days prior to the attack. The 15-year-old is accused of being in possession of a barrier pole as well at the same time or place. Now, both teenagers made no plea when they appeared at Glasgow Sheriff Court 2 weeks ago. The 14-year-old was remanded in custody while the 15-year-old was granted bail. Now, it's been just 3 weeks since Amen Teckley's death, and in that period, he's been described by his sister as a kind and a bright young boy. His head teacher previously described him as friendly and a much-loved young man who loved media and the music. He was originally from Eritrea, but he'd been living in Glasgow with his father, and he had recently received right to remain status here in the UK. The 16-year-old who appeared in court at Glasgow Sheriff Court today is expected to appear again in 8 days' time.
OK, Hope, thank you for the update. Some of the day's other stories now. And a Scottish tourist has been seriously injured in a suspected gas explosion that destroyed his holiday home B&B in Rome. 54-year-old Grant Patterson from East Kilbride was rescued on Saturday morning from the rubble of a 3-storey building in the Monteverde area. Mr Patterson's receiving treatment in hospital for severe burns.
Supermarket chain Morrisons is shutting 2 stores here and reducing the range of specialist counters as it seeks to cut costs. The closures of convenience stores across the UK include one in Peebles and one in Stewarton in Ayrshire. 52 cafes are also closing, a quarter of them in Scotland.
Still to come, we have the weather with Christopher, and we also hear how COVID affected the lives of some teenagers.
But first, let's get tonight's sports now with Lewis.
Thank you very much. Hello there. A bump in the road is how Steve Clarke described the 3-0 defeat to Greece that knocked Scotland off the top perch of the Nations League. Clarke says he needs time to think about what went wrong as the visitors inflicted one of the worst defeats on the national team since he took charge 6 years ago. Paul Barnes reports.
It's an embarrassing night for us. I think everyone's kind of flat after it. You can feel it in the stadium. We let ourselves down tonight. We've had plenty of praise over a playoff, but tonight we really let ourselves down and we pay the price.
Everything's possible. You know, the boys assured me they were all fit and well. I think the first goal gave them a lift. So could have done with a few more legs in the team, to be honest.
We're going to get a chance to have revenge on them, a little bit later in the year when they come back to the World Cup qualifier. So that's the plan.
This is the bump in the road. If there's one thing I've learned over my time in charge of the national team is there are bumps in the road. It's how you react to it.
So yes, Scotland drawn with Denmark and Greece with Belarus making up Group C. Just 6 games in this round-robin format, all taking place across September, October and November. Only the winners are guaranteed a place at the World Cup, although there could be a backdoor entry for the runners-up through a playoff. That's all to come though. But as for where last night's result leaves Clark and his players going into a crucial year, that's something I discussed a little earlier with former Scotland winger Pat Nevin.
There have been ups and there have been downs, but that was one of the downs, and particularly at home at Hampden Park. You know, you expect everyone to turn up, the crowd was buzzing, everyone's ready for it, you had a goal start, you know, everything in your favour, and it just didn't happen.
For everything that Steve Clarke has achieved as Scotland manager, he's still come in for spells of criticism, of course. There have been some low points, but you know him very well, Pat. Where do you think this leaves Steve Clarke right now, moving forward?
I suppose what I look at is the longer term thing. I always look at the longer term thing. Stevie's had 2 out of the 3 competitions he's tried to get us into the finals, and he's managed 2 out of 3, which is pretty good with everything that went before that. On top of that, there have been some bad nights. Now, have a look at it. We won 8, we drew 1 of them. That included Spain, Ukraine and Norway, beating all of them.
It's now about looking forward in the games to come. Our World Cup qualifiers, Greece are in that group as well, of course, and Denmark drop into it as well. It's a big campaign for...
Given all sorts of effort, they just want to be there. And I think they deserve to be there, but it's going to be tough. There's no way it's going to be easy with those groups. I'm delighted in one way that we found out what Greece were all about. However, the Greeks are good. They're particularly good at one thing, which is breaking at pace. We'll be ready for that next time. I have absolutely no doubt.
Pat Nevin, as optimistic as ever, but it's going to be a long couple of months before the national team are back together, I think.
Yes, indeed. Onwards, Lewis. That's all we can say, I think.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Well, we're marking 5 years on from the COVID lockdown tonight, and while the majority of us recovered after catching COVID, some have endured lasting and often debilitating symptoms. Long COVID, as it's known, has affected hundreds of thousands of Scots, including an estimated 10,000 children.
Helen Goss's daughter Anna was 7 when she first became ill with COVID, and she's now 12 and is still bedbound. Helen is now heading up the Long COVID Kids charity, and I asked her how it's still affecting her daughter's life.
She has lost her childhood. She hasn't really had one. She hasn't been able to go to school since 2020, late 2020, and she can't do a lot of education at home because she's just too unwell. So she has lost out on all of those milestones. She doesn't have any friends. It's just really heartbreaking. It is tragic, and she is not the only one. There are so many children just like her.
So very difficult for them. What has been available in terms of treatment, support and perhaps research? Because this is something you've done a lot of work on and you know so much about.
Yeah, we are very fortunate to work with some incredible researchers worldwide who are working really hard on trying to find treatments and a way forward. In Scotland, unfortunately, despite years of engagement with the Scottish Government and NHS Scotland, we are really no further ahead. There are only 3 dedicated paediatric long COVID services in Scotland, and they're based on a rehabilitation model, not a medical model. They're not actually getting the medicine that they need. And there are treatments that can improve quality of life that should and could be available on the NHS. But instead, families are having to spend an absolute fortune on private healthcare so that they can access the treatment and the support that they need. And, you know, some families have lost their houses, they've lost their jobs because they're having to care full time for their children who are newly disabled. And it's just the wider impact of having such a sick child is enormous.
And the Scottish Government say they take this very seriously. They point to that worldwide research as well that you just mentioned. But is it your feeling, you and other parents going through supporting children with long COVID, that not enough is being done? That's what it sounds like you're saying.
They have invested £10 million over 3 years, which then got extended to 4 and then 5. And we don't actually know where this money has gone. And we can't see any tangible difference on the ground.
And Helen, what is your hope now for Anna and the other young people like her who are living with long COVID? What's the hope for the future?
My hope for the future is that she makes a full recovery. Obviously, that is always going to be our goal. I will not allow my child and thousands of other children to be acceptable collateral damage. They deserve treatment, and they should have the treatment that they need.
Helen Goss talking to Laura earlier. And the Scottish Government says since April 2022, they've allocated more than £8 million of their £10 million long COVID support fund to boards and other organisations to support the response to long COVID. Further allocations will be made in the next financial year. Now, the economic impact of the COVID restrictions was huge. It's estimated 20,000 small Scottish firms have folded since the pandemic hit. Some sectors, like hospitality and tourism, took a huge hit in the money they brought in. There were other changes for businesses too, like the rise of working from home. Here is our business correspondent, David Henderson.
How are things?
Rory Penman works for a large Scottish law firm, but since the pandemic, that's meant he's sometimes based at a desk in his living room instead of the office.
I'm mostly in the office. I like being in the office, but most Monday mornings, Tuesday afternoons, I'll work from home, and that allows me to do school and nursery drop-off pickup. I like it especially because I can basically use all of my time working and still be involved in the kids' lives and our childcare commitments.
And when Rory does go into the office, he has to book ahead to reserve a desk. And since most of his colleagues do the same, the firm doesn't need seats for its entire workforce. But that still leaves space for those who are taking a break.
It allows people to work at a time that suits them. It drives employee engagement, employee commitment, employee loyalty to the organisation where we offer hybrid working. It allows people to save money in terms of travelling costs, in terms of travelling time, and they use that time to work for us, so it's great for productivity.
Lockdown helped accelerate a move towards more work from home, and for most Scottish employers, there's little sign they want to go back to a 9-to-5 operation.
The trend for flexible working can be seen every morning and every evening on our railways and on our roads, with the traditional rush hour just a shadow of its former self.
But not everyone backs this trend. The online retailer Amazon wants all its office staff back in the office. So too this financial firm JP Morgan Chase, who are in Glasgow. They argue success is best achieved through working together in person. But this consultant told us employers face pressure to offer more flexible working, not less.
So we're starting to see things like employers being much more conscious of start times, finish times, jobs where there's maybe an element of admin, enabling people to do that at home, flexing the start times, the finish times. All those things can make a massive difference for people.
So for Rory Penman, flexible working's meant more time with his family and a better balance between home and work, long after lockdown's been lifted. David Henderson, reporting Scotland.
Well, the pandemic and the unprecedented restrictions on our lives which came with it were felt right across the country for several years. Our reporter Cameron Bussell has been getting a sense of how it affected one community, the Borders town of Melrose.
Since 1877, Melrose Rugby Club has been at the heart of the town, a focus in good times and bad. But the pandemic closed down the one place that could bring the community together.
We tried all sorts to try and engage with our members and the community. We put out sort of a call to arms if anyone was able to help with things like doing the groceries or walking dogs or other things like that. And we saw, the club's a massive part of the community, but the club was also actually then able to help the community.
The community nursing team is a tight-knit one, especially after what they experienced during COVID.
It was very lonely, and because of the nature of your job, you have to see your patients. You cannot not stop seeing them because of COVID.
How do you think it is now?
I think it's much improved, but we're now dealing with the aftermath, where caseloads are a lot busier. People are frightened to come out the house. Some elderly people, they're nervous about COVID still, and understandably.
Many high streets are still struggling, but Melrose is one of the few that has bucked the trend. There are no empty shop fronts here. There were a few lockdown casualties, and it has been far from easy, but the vast majority of businesses did pull through.
At the time it was terrifying because we didn't know how the business would survive, if it would survive, and then we worked really hard just to keep engaging with our customers even when we were shut, and when we opened everybody came back and supported us. So many positives came from it. In fact, we realised how many people really wanted us to be here.
History is a huge draw for the Borders. On the outskirts of Melrose is Abbotsford House, built by novelist Sir Walter Scott. For the team running the house and gardens, there has never been a chance to recover from the damage COVID did. They've just had to lay off 7 staff.
Ticket sales remain about 25% down overall at Abbotsford than they were back in 2019.
It must be quite frustrating having those numbers but just not getting the revenue.
It is difficult because the revenues are down for us. We've got more people than ever coming, which is great, but our costs have also gone up significantly.
In a quiet corner just outside town, a memorial stands to those who lost their lives to COVID and to those who saved so many others. A testament to the price this small border town paid in the face of a global pandemic. Cameron Buttle, reporting Scotland, Melrose.
Well, earlier in the programme, we heard from some lockdown babies who are just about to start school at the age of 5. Now we're going to look at how coronavirus and the lockdowns impacted on teenagers at the time. They've been speaking to our colleagues at the BBC's youth-led video platform, The Social.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
My name's Ellie. I was in Cooperangus. I was 13 when we locked down.
My name's Nathan. I was in Aberdeen. I was 15 when we locked down.
I'm Cara. I was in Motherwell and I was 14 years old when lockdown happened.
I first became aware of it from my mum and my dad. They're both very into watching the news, reading newspapers.
I remember my mum's telling me about it to some like, I'm so confused. What is this meaning? I do not understand what's going on.
It was quite scary because it kept getting closer and closer to home. Every single time there was a new outbreak somewhere in the world, it kind of felt like it was just kind of closing in.
Bare essentials and things would just be gone, and I'd never seen anything like it.
No toilet roll in sight in any of the shops.
I didn't mind wearing the masks, to be honest, because it kind of meant like, oh, I didn't have to talk to anyone. I was like, oh, you can't hear me through the mask, that's a shame.
What I remember about masks, it was a big struggle for me and other deaf people. We rely on lip reading to see what people are saying and how we communicate, and it was very, very difficult.
School in lockdown, I hated it.
It's a shame because the teachers genuinely tried their best.
Sometimes you miss hear what's been said. I have so much anxiety with that, especially as a deaf person.
People just wouldn't turn their cameras on, so you knew they weren't really listening, and it felt so isolating.
It wasn't great. I was never really fully engaged with any of my learning, so I definitely think it impacted me later on.
When I heard that lockdown was finished, I didn't know how to react.
I don't know whether I was excited or upset, but I remember crying.
Before lockdown, I was quite friend orientated. After lockdown, because I spent so much time with my grandparents and they were so helpful and so caring and generous through that whole period, I think I became a lot more grateful for what I had.
It was really hard because my papa passed away as well during lockdown. I couldn't go and visit him. It was all we had to do was a phone call. It just shows how important your family is.
Lockdown made me realise that I have to go out and experience new things, and that no matter what happens, tomorrow isn't promised. So today has to be the best day of your life, just in case.
Well, in the middle of some really tough times, there was some fun. For the sports commentator Andrew Cotter, his whole livelihood was on pause, so he decided to commentate on the exploits of his dogs, Olive and Mabel, instead, and then post the videos on social media. And the rest, as they say, is history. I went to visit them all at their home.
What we lost at that time, we lost all the sort of colourful and enjoyable aspects of life. So if you could try and bring that in some other way, just through these two.
Well, how fitting that it should come down to these two. Olive in her familiar black, 5 times the champion. Mabel, the rising star, winner last year. You can see how excited they are, but also feel the tension.
Get on with it.
And here it's in the crowd as we near the start of this final. And now they go, Olive away first, but a problem with Mabel's ball. That might cost her now, having to play catch up.
It was boredom mixed with a little bit of panic and dread. Because it was, I mean, I suppose at the heart of it was the fact that all work had gone. It was during the Six Nations and the last match went to and there was one day where everything disappeared. It was, Wimbledon went, London Marathon went, the Masters, so everything disappeared. And so, we were laughing about it initially, going, oh, when am I next going to have work? And then you went, oh, when am I next going to have work?
So you put these videos up, you get this global attention, and then a book deal comes along.
First book did well, and what these two, they have no idea obviously, but what these two have done is help me pivot slightly in my career and life to trying other things and doing other things. So it started with no plan at all about it. It started as one video put out when all the sport disappeared, and at that point that video went out, everything changed.
So into the final minute and Olive in possession, but this is where Mabel is strong, chasing the game, using that intensity. We saw it in the semi-final.
Do you think they helped you then?
If the Olive and Mabel thing hadn't happened, they would still have helped me each and every day just by them being dogs. And I have no doubt that for so many people, dogs were their saviours during that time, because they were that little bit of normality, because they were something that was outside everything human and odd that was going on in our world. Dogs will have been just an absolute salvation for people. So even without, what have you done? Look at the state of you. What's on your nose? Even without the videos and the strangeness and the fun and the silliness of it, these two would have absolutely saved my sanity anyway. So that's what they do. That's why you're good dogs. Oh, hello, you've joined the party.
And a very big thank you to Olive and Mabel and Andrew, of course, for speaking to me.
The stars, you're very lucky. Right, let's take a look at the weather now. Christopher's here. How can you follow Olive and Mabel? I don't know.
A bit of sunshine?
Yeah, good dog walking weather today.
Yes, very much. Let me show you some of the pictures that come into us from our weather watchers today. Lovely sunshine there in Fife and across East Lothian as well. Cloudier skies in the north and northwest, and that's now moving south. Let's take a look at what's coming up over the next few days, because yes, today we had some lovely sunshine and blue sky for much of the mainland, but thicker cloud in the north and northwest with some outbreaks of rain. And as we take a look at the chart over the next few hours, you can see that cloud and rain now working its way southwards. But as the rain moves south overnight, tending to fizzle out. Nowhere near as cold as last night either, with all that cloud acting like a blanket, so temperatures 7 to 9 Celsius in towns and cities. To tomorrow, and we've got a ridge of high pressure overhead, affording us a largely dry and fine day. A pretty decent day of weather, actually. Any early mist and cloud, low cloud, that'll clear, and then it's a fine day with some decent spells of sunshine, as I mentioned. A little more cloud with 1 or 2 showers across Orkney and Shetland, and perhaps a little more cloud towards the west coast and through the Minches, but elsewhere it's dry and fine, set fair. Temperatures low to mid-teens, and with light winds, that'll feel fairly pleasant, actually. Towards the north and northeast coast, more of a breeze here. Again, a little bit cooler with 1 or 2 showers for Orkney and Shetland. A little more cloud towards the northwest coast, through the Minches and across the Western Isles there. Now, as we head in towards tomorrow evening, under clear skies, colder than this coming night, with temperatures down close to freezing, if not seeing a frost, certainly across the south and towards the northeast. A little more cloud, a little more breeze in the northwest, so less cold here. That takes us to Wednesday, and it's another pretty decent day for most, not all. You can see thicker cloud towards the west and northwest, more of a wind here as well, coming in from the southwesterly direction, and a weather front bringing some rain towards the Western Isles later on. But if you're in the sunshine, once again, temperatures mid, maybe even sneaking to high teens. For the end of the week, we lose the high pressure, low pressure takes over. That means turning more unsettled, cloudy with outbreaks of rain and a cooler feel as well. So you can see through Thursday and Friday, temperatures coming back down, fairly cloudy at times with some outbreaks of rain. But the next couple of days, sunshine for most. That's the forecast for now.
Good to hear, Christopher, thank you. Well, that is it from us on this Reporting Scotland special, 5 years on from the first COVID lockdown.
Yeah, we'll leave you this evening with some of the lasting images of then and now. From all of us here, good night.
Well, it's really very strange here in the city centre of Glasgow. The streets practically empty apart from buses and the occasional taxi. You can only begin to imagine the economic impact all of this is going to have.
Well, what do you think of this?
Madness, madness. I'm expecting all the zombies to come running in the corner any minute now, you know what I mean?